Welcome to the Journal of Biophilic Design podcast. Well, thanks for joining us on the Journal of Biophilic Design today. We recently published issue 11 of the Journal of Biophilic Design, which had a focus on hotels and leisure. And to celebrate this, we are thrilled to have Louis Thompson. He's founder of Nomadic Resorts with us today. Nomadic Resorts were one of the finalists also of the 2023 Stephen Kellett Biophilic Design Award, which we were delighted to partner with Living Future Europe to co-publish the book of the winners and also the finalists of the award. So have a beautiful book. It's full of inspiration. So I'm going to put a link at the bottom of the spiel that goes with this podcast for people to download their copy. But Nomadic Resorts have won lots of awards, other awards as well, Dezeen and Condé Nast Traveller, to name a few. And but first of all, listeners, I do encourage you to go to their website. Louis, hello, first of all. So maybe as well say, get that out of the way. Hi, how are you? You all right?
Hi, Ness. I'm really well, thank you.
Good. Can you just first share, because I've mentioned your website, what's your website address?
It's www.nomadicresorts.com.
Lovely. So people, make sure you check it out, because I actually want to say that it will give you a moment of respite. You've got some beautiful videos on there. Honestly, I was there for ages just going, I don't know what questions I'm going to ask you, but I'm going to hang out here for a while. And I was just like watching the beautiful places that you designed. And so, people go to the go to the website. But Louis, thanks very much for joining us. And I don't know if you could start by telling us a little bit about yourself. What is your background? And then a little bit about what you do now, if that's all right.
Okay, so I was born in Cambridge in England, so I'm English, but I moved to the Indian Ocean when I was like 23. I didn't study architecture or landscape architecture. I actually studied European politics, which I'm glad I didn't pursue. And when I moved out to the Indian Ocean, I studied hotel management. I was already very involved in permaculture design for a long time. And at the end of my hospitality management degree, I got offered a job to go and work in the Maldives to develop a kind of organic vegetable garden, farm to fork kind of restaurant project for a very exclusive hotel operator. For a company called Six Senses. And it's a bit of a strange story is that we'd only been in the Maldives for a month, and then the 2004 tsunami struck. And basically, to cut a long story short, it was a bit of a hair-raising experience. But the kind of project team who were brought on board to rebuild the resort kind of adopted me and asked me to stay on and help them to re-landscape and do a regenerative landscaping concept for the island. So we stayed on after the tsunami, and that went fairly well because then they gave me another restaurant to design to design the landscape in the Maldives. So we built a restaurant called Fresh in the Garden at Sonderbafushi, and then I got kind of integrated into the Six Senses development team. And I had the great fortune of just being given very unique, special projects to do, including, building a giant manta ray in the jungle for children to play in, a treetop dining pod, a zero carbon hotel room. And I stayed with that company for a long time, I think 8-9 years. And then I had a little bit of a flash that when we finished the treetop dining pod, and it was featured in lots of magazines and even on CNN, I think, I realized that there would be a very strong possibility that this kind of product would be popular in the future in the hospitality and leisure industry. So I started Nomadic Resorts in 2012.
Okay.
And I basically recruited some of the kind of better people, the best people I'd worked with actually, and put together this kind of, I don't know how you call it. It'd be probably the Power Rangers of organic architecture. And So had the good fortune to be able to design different kinds of tents, different kinds of restaurants, spas, resorts for various hotel groups across the world.
Wow, that's amazing. Amazing. I like that. Power Rangers. I've just noticed, so you're looking at your site, there's like, all the bamboo, and it's really lovely. And so you got the sort of background in permaculture. So you understand how sort of plants and water and air and everything like that kind of all sort of coincide and nurture one another. I mean, obviously, but this is a biophilic design podcast. So, for you, why is biophilic design or this sort of biophilia connection? Why is that important to you?
I think there's a couple of different reasons, but I think the principal one is I've always believed in that inherent human need to interact with the natural environment. And I read the Biophilic Design book many, many years ago, probably when it just came out. And some of the guidelines and the general philosophies, really resonated with us as a team. So we integrated it as a kind of core theme in all of our design. So we use biomimicry and biophilic design. And I think maybe it's luck, but maybe it's inevitable, was that there would be this growing um, convergence between wellness design and biophilic design,
Mm.
and this idea that hospitality or leisure products would try to find techniques that made people feel relaxed, secure, and inspired. So we've really always used that throughout the history of the company as very much the core tenet of what we do. And we've been delighted to see that that has gained in popularity, particularly over the last couple of years, and now has become, I'm not going to say mainstream, but we're getting towards a situation where new resorts and particularly new wellness retreats, a lot of people are very, very interested in this, in how they can enhance the mental health of their guests. So we feel that basically the use of natural materials, biophilic design, and natural cooling techniques has really allowed us to kind of develop a niche within the sector that has been growing rapidly, and we expect that to continue because the wellness tourism market is hugely in expansion at the moment, and I think that's going to continue very much for the foreseeable future.
Yeah, exactly. And maybe we can talk about the project that you won, the Stephen Kellett Biophilic Design. Sorry, you was a finalist. Sorry, start again. You was a finalist in the Stephen Kellett Biophilic Design Award in 2023. I was just going to say, can you tell us a little bit about that? The bamboo treehouse village.
Yeah.
I'm not even going to try and pronounce it. It's Playa Viva bamboo tree houses in Mexico. Can you tell us about that? Could you and talk about the sort of natural airflow? And I mean, people who are listening to this, I mean, obviously they're going to go to your website and have a look. But can you try to explain what maybe the brief was, but what it sort of looks like?
Okay, so in the middle of COVID, I got a telephone call from David Leventhal, who's one of the founders of the regenerative travel movement, which has also been growing exponentially. And I'd met him a couple of years earlier at an event, and he asked me, "Can you design a series of bamboo manta rays?" And I was like, "Well, strangely enough, we've got some experience in that." So he showed us this kind of very crazy, kind of cartoon type graphic image of these giant manta rays, sort of leaping out of the jungle. And this had come from a drone photographer who'd come to visit Playa Viva and had taken this incredible drone footage of I think it's called a platoon of modular rays that were swimming offshore, but there's like certainly hundreds, maybe thousands of them together, creating this huge kind of flock of rays. And we're big fans of rays. We think rays are cool.
Yeah.
And so we said, yeah, okay, let's do it. And then he said to us, can you do it so that we can open in December? And we were already in April, and I was like, well, we can try. And so so we went through this very weird kind of design process where we couldn't go and visit the site because of the COVID restrictions. But David's very hands-on, and it was like a great interlocutor on site and would show us videos and he had this very clear vision. And what was interesting about that was that David knew exactly the kind of client that he was targeting.
Mm.
He already had a couple of very cool tree houses, and basically, as it's a sort of, let's call it a bohemian yoga retreat, and it's an incredible piece of beach. It's 20 kilometers of deserted beach on the Pacific coast of Mexico. And he said, I really want the guests. Firstly, it was the first time we had a client who said, I don't want air conditioning. So that was great. Okay, we've been waiting for somebody to say that for like 10 years.
Yeah.
And he said, I don't want air conditioning, and I want people to really feel their environment.
Yeah.
Cool. I want them to smell the salt air. I want to be able to hear the waves crashing against the shoreline, which was really, for us, it was the kind of design brief that we'd been dreaming of. So we developed this a bamboo structure that's attached to two coconut trees that we transplanted on the site. And then we built this huge parabolic umbrella roof structure to basically cover the whole thing so that when the hurricanes and heavy rains came, you had the sufficient eaves to protect the building from direct rainfall. And then we brought on board Jörg Stamm, who's a good friend of ours, who's a master bamboo craftsman. And Jörg lives in South America, so he was able to go to site and supervise the construction. And we did it in a very different way from other projects. In that first, we identified the emotions, the feelings that we wanted people to have at that place. And then we developed a very lightweight, permeable structure that had different kind of envelopes that you could close off. So in bad weather, you could block the breeze and you could protect yourself against mosquitoes, but you were very, very much exposed to the natural elements. And it's elevated at 3 meters tall. And on the front, you have a catamaran net hammock directly overlooking the Pacific Ocean. And then we use local craftsmen, as we try to do with all of our projects, to build 12 incredible tree houses in a remarkable location. And all of it was related to, it wasn't just a question of biomimicry, it was really a question of biophilic design, in the sense that the feeling of the building, you have refuge and prospect. So you had this idea that you were hidden away and you had a certain amount of privacy, but you could also, see the landscape around you. That beach is incredible. It has turtles nesting there, little baby turtles running down to the sea, and I knew it had been a successful project when I read an article by a journalist in Travel and Leisure who had been there on a visit, and it happened to be a lunar eclipse on that particular night, and she had this sort of transformative experience, which, I mean, you couldn't have written a better article, really. So. And that's been a great project for us. And David was a great client. He was very clear in what he wanted, and we managed to create something that I think is unique in its own way. And it's been featured in dozens of magazines, dozens of websites, and all over the place. So it's been a very successful project for us.
Yeah, because of the biophilic and the biomimicry, obviously, with the manta rays and the kind of all the echoes of nature that you've got actually in the building and the shapes and things. But the biophilic design, the natural airflow, being able to just experience the temperature and the humidity change and everything, all these things that we really, really need. I mean, it's such a lovely holistic way of being.
Well, this is part of a wider belief, I think, is that living in air-conditioned boxes and kind of going from one air-conditioned space to another through the car, I think it basically has divorced people from their environment.
Yeah.
And we believe that giving people the opportunity to have a real connection, an authentic connection to the natural environment is actually a kind of luxury now. So, I personally believe that the technologies that we use to facilitate our lives can be detrimental to some of our natural inherent skills. So, if you use GPS every day, you'll gradually lose your sense of orientation, your natural sense of orientation. And I think that these kind of buildings, though obviously it's a superficial thing to go on holiday to a yoga retreat in a way, can be really beneficial to change people's perception of their environment and change the way that they interact with the ecological context that they're in.
Yeah, and it helps them. I mean, it helps us reconnect with ourselves as well, doesn't it? I think, like you say, we're so surrounded by machines, I suppose, isn't it? Kind of things that are not organic, that are not biophilic, if you want. They're not living. They're like I say, GPS, or that they're air conditioning, their HVAC systems. There's a whir, there's a hum, there's a noise, there's pollution of some kind in a space, and being able to just open a window, I think for me is just like the best thing. I hate it when I go into an office and there's like I can't actually open the window. I don't know. I think I've just lived so much outside, if or just being able to control, being able to just get outside and open spaces, that I personally struggle now when I'm just inside a box. And I think if creating spaces like you're doing for people to reconnect with that memory, that inherent memory that's in us, that this whole biophilia premise or the hypothesis kind of like celebrates, really, I think is a beautiful thing.
Yeah, and I think landscape design, that interaction between internal and outdoor spaces is really important. So we try and combine permaculture, regenerative landscaping with the bamboo structures or the tented pods, so that there's a kind of ongoing continuity between indoor and outdoor. The one thing I slightly regret about Playa Viva is initially we were going to do a water slide from the from the bedroom into a plunge pool underneath the structure, which we didn't have time to build it, unfortunately, but I think that would have been a little bit magical. So that kind of importance of framing views of nature and providing vistas or panoramas is critical to our mental health. And as we know, at the moment in the world, there is a mental health epidemic, and people feel isolated, depressed, lonely. And I think that we can contribute in our small way to try and help people to reconnect with themselves, as well as other people, right? Because sometimes you need a quiet space with no TV and no Bluetooth speaker to be able to actually have a proper conversation, as we know, has become increasingly difficult in the noisy world we live in.
Yeah, absolutely. And obviously biophilia, I often talk about that, but bio does mean life, living things, us too. So that whole, reducing the isolation, just taking us back into being able to connect with something and somebody, and it's just creating those havens for people to be and to thrive in. What a wonderful thing that you're doing. I did want to ask you, when you've got so many beautiful examples of projects and things that you've done on your site, and this, Playa Viva is like, I think is just absolutely stunning. I have to try and get to stay there, I think, just to experience it. But do you have a favorite projects, or that you'd like to share with us?
Yeah, I think the first project that Olav and I worked on together was such an unusual opportunity. So my ex-boss, Sonu Shivdasani, who was the founder of Six Senses, asked us to create a treetop dining experience in an old growth forest overlooking the Gulf of Siam in Thailand at Sonavakiri.
Mm.
And first, it was kind of a very unusual request, because I think I was 24 or 25 at the time, and Olav was younger. He was 22 or 21 or 22. And suddenly we didn't really have a budget for the project. And they just said, we want people to be able to dine up in the canopy of this old growth forest. So we took inspiration from saprophytic fungi, which are those mushrooms that grow laterally out of dead wood. And we created this kind of little pod on an elevator winch. So one of the first things was to try and get an elevator into the middle of the jungle, which was those small feet. And we suspended the entire structure from a series of like a cable spider web. And then we got the opportunity to do some pretty unusual things. So to get the insurance, we had to prove that the trees were healthy. So we used a machine called a picosonic tomography machine to basically do a echography or a 3D scan of the interior of all of the trees to check their health. And then we selected the best trees to attach the cables to. There were no nails, no screws. There was no harm to the trees at all. And we created this woven basket, much like a nest. And that was suspended from a steel frame. And the cables went over 3 pulleys within that, so that the nest can go down to the ground. People get into the nest, and then the waiter flies in on a zip line, presses a button, and then the nest rises up 11 meters into the canopy with this stunning view of the remote island. We're very lucky that we get the opportunity to do that kind of thing. And I think that was my favorite project because it was so extraordinary in the sense that to get that kind of opportunity to design something like that at such a young age was great. To not have a budget was incredible. And we'd kind of assumed this would go on for, 5 or 6 years, and then they'd think of something else. And now, I think it's 16 years later, it's still operational, and people are still making proposing to each other. People are still having, important life events in that little bird's nest in the trees. And I think that that's probably my favorite project because Olav and I developed a working relationship for that project. I was on site doing the realization, and Olav had designed and done the engineering. So that for me, that was a landmark project.
That's beautiful. I love that little bird nest in the trees, But it's only it's easy when we go these places, as a user, if you want, we go there to enjoy them and go, wow, this is amazing, isn't it, view? And we forget about the back end actually. It's the engineering, it's all that logistics. But I mean that's creative and in itself, I should imagine. Is it for you? Is it like trying to find solutions and the collaboration, the collaborative process?
Yeah, I love that part of it. We've had, so for the treetop dining pod, we had a team of Karan hill tribesmen
Oh
from
wow.
Chiang Mai, and so they worked with us, and they were fantastic people. I mean, absolutely delightful people. From remote mountain villages in northern Thailand. I've worked with Sri Lankan fishermen in Corinda in Sri Lanka. I've worked with absolutely incredible carpenters and craftsmen in Maldives and with people from Bali. So that whole interaction, I feel very at home with those kind of people. I like to be on the building site, and I like to meet and learn from craftsmen who have knowledge of traditional. They have traditional skills and knowledge of the vernacular architecture. And that's very important, I think, because it gives each of the projects a sense of place. And they also, these things become iconic for the local community. They become important, kind of landmarks for them. When you build an extraordinary structure with a village, with a whole village, literally, then that becomes super important. So I remember when we finished Wild Coast Tented Lodge in Sri Lanka, We had a day before the resort opened where we did an open day where all the workers' families came. And that was just the most incredible experience because they'd seen their fathers disappear, for a period of probably 8, 9 months. And then suddenly for them to see what we'd done was really a very nice occasion, actually.
Oh, that's beautiful. That's lovely. As you say, not just, learning from the local, the vernacular, the local architects and the local craftsmen, and that've been doing this stuff for years and learnt ways of using the local materials as well and how things joint together and all this stuff. And then to be able to celebrate it with the family and and the people, the community as well. I mean, what a lovely life affirming way of creating and constructing, actually.
Well, it's an interaction. We've had incredibly skilled people with fantastic ideas who have really contributed very, very significantly to the projects that we've been involved in. So it's very much a two-way thing. It's that we're learning from them, they're learning some stuff from us, and I think that that's a good way of building bridges, and those bridges can connect cultures and peoples around projects.
I was going to say, I can actually something a bit conceptual. I mean, people know, so I'm an artist as well, and I sculpt and do dry points and all that sort of stuff, and obviously photographs and videos and things. But as an artist and a creator, what inspires you? What's the well, I need all the other stuff like project management and all that kind of thing. But what is it nature that inspires you? Is it or is it just like the air, or is it something you see? And people have briefs as well, but when it comes to finding solutions and things, I mean, you talk about collaboration, but is there like an overarching thing that kind of that sort of inspires you for the
Yeah, and I don't want to sound too fluffy, but we have a lot of respect for what we call the genius loci.
mm,
In traditional Roman architecture, the sense of place or the spirit of the place was a sort of fundamental consideration in the design of buildings. And we take that very, very seriously, to the point that we often find inspiration for the buildings on site, but not necessarily in the large dramatic landscaping panorama of the, but often we find the best inspiration in the tiniest little things, in a foot where we've just done a beach bar in Goa that's inspired by the shells that we found on site. We developed the seed pod based on these strange little seed pods we found, next to the river. And then, we've also always loved this idea of emulating boulders or boulderscapes or trying to create things that sit comfortably into the context. And but it could be an insect, it could be a fungi, it's very rarely anything particularly spectacular. So sometimes, clients think we're mad when they see us sort of poking around in flotsam and jetsam, looking for little bits and bobs and collecting things and then taking them home and then taking photos and videos of them. And then suddenly there's something quite different that appears out of it.
oh, that's lovely, really nice. Saying it's the small things, and again, it's back to the honesty, isn't it? It's about creating the genus loci. That spirit of a place. I think it's so important. I think it's lovely. I think it's beautiful what you're doing. Um, I was going to do it. So you mentioned the seed pods and the tent things that you've got there. So can I talk about that actually? Because we do have specifiers that do listen to this, and there's architects and there's landowners and all this kind of thing that might want to have something of yours there but can't afford the big thing or don't have the space to do that. And I love that you've got these like prefabricated tents, which I mean are brilliant. Even the names are great: the hive, the seed pods, and the urchin. Can you tell us about the concept, please? I mean, you kind of touched on it just now, but and what was your vision for them? What's
Okay, so the Looper was the first one we did, which is our
mm,
kind of biggest tent. So we have a range of tent products or tensile membrane structures, as we call them. So when I worked for these big hotel companies, I always found it incredibly frustrating, the sheer number of people required to build a lot of this stuff. And, often in these remote locations, having a lot of workers at the site was actually kind of detrimental to the biotic community. So there'd be a lot of fishing, a lot of hunting.
Mm.
Workers' camps were always slightly grotty places, to be honest. So at the end of Sonovakiri, we sat down and we kind of asked ourselves, is there a different way of doing this? And, could you prefabricate the core and shell of the structure and send that to site and then erect it with a small number of workers who were a little bit more skilled and that was more reliable in terms of the quality. So we developed the first pod. We was inspired by the chrysalis of a caterpillar we found in Thailand, and caterpillar cocoon has a number of different symbols associated with it, and they're all quite positive. So there's like there's growth, security, transformation, safety, and metamorphosis, obviously. So that the cocoon was essentially an effort to create a hotel room that offered all of the amenities you'd get in a kind of fancy luxury resort, but in a much lighter weight envelope. So as I mentioned before, I'd done this zero carbon villa completely made from natural materials. But when I did the life cycle analysis of the building, I was quite surprised that, even though we'd used site sourced materials and renewable energies, et cetera, the actual carbon footprint was relatively high. And then we realized that basically using architectural fabrics and new types of insulation, we could create something that was really significantly lighter, but still maintained the same structural integrity. So we started our little journey into making these pods, and that's been quite successful for us. So now we're in Mach 3 of the Looper. So I think this might be the best one we've done so far. So as I sometimes joke, I've spent 10 years pitching a tent. But I think we've got it right this time. So the latest iteration is really very quick to install, has very good thermal performance, has good acoustic performance, has this great interaction with its environment, but respects the passive, the bioclimatic conditions of the site. And that's been an interesting and fun journey, and it's something I really want to commit a little bit more time to over this coming year. Is really see if we can offer people, a new way of living, because they're not just hotel rooms. You could live in them. They last 25, 30 years. They're engineered to 130 or even 280-kilometer-hour wind speeds. They've got a lockable door. They can be air conditioned or heated. So what we hope is over the coming years, we'll be developing little communities under our brand Nomadic Escapes, where people, like-minded people who enjoy, organic produce, outdoor adventure sports activities, and, have a similar mentality in terms of their, let's call it, ecological intelligence, and to create these communities where people can come and live, maybe not all the year, but part of the year, and then rent out their tent for the rest of the year. And this is something that I've focused a lot of attention on over the last 2 years.
I think it's a great idea. I think it's like people have got a thirst for that, haven't they? I think people are wanting to, even if they're in the city or even if they're not, it's like people are looking for an escape. They're looking for something to reconnect them to nature, and that's a nice model actually, to people to kind of come as one, and then offer it up to other people to go and stay. If they can't afford to buy one, then to actually a rented out thing. So it's a nice holistic concept. So great. Well, do send me the links and I will put them on the website that goes with the podcast. And so before I ask you the final question, Louis, is there anything that you anything you'd like to add at all? Or a message?
No, I would just like to thank all the people in the biophilic design community, really. I think, I think people have done some fantastic projects and doing some fantastic work across the world. And, you know, I'd like to take my hat off to everybody who's involved in this, not only in the journal, but also in the biophilic community at large for, their contributions and their passion and their commitment to the cause, if you like, because I think we can change the world in little ways. And we said we weren't going to get too political, but God knows at this current juncture in time, I think people do need to find new ways of living and be able to develop a better sense of community and interaction in a world where we're increasingly polarized by the algorithms. We do need to find these spaces. We need to create these spaces, and that's an important mission. And maybe it won't be immediately obvious today or tomorrow, but maybe in 10, 15 years' time, we will see that these ideas have really caught on and that we have developed, almost, independent communities of people living in a much more symbiotic relationship with the natural environment, and probably enjoying doing so.
Yeah, exactly. Well, let's hope that happens. I think something's got to change, and I think things are changing. I think that's the positive thing that I'm taking out. That's keeping me going anyway. Talking to people like yourself, and you seeing how that's cascading and inspiring other people to do different and build different. And it's happening in mainstream slowly, but it is getting there. And I think with the people in the right place and the next generation wanting to do the right thing and creating spaces that are better, I think it's happening, and I think the more we can do just in our own space to inspire people, I think is wonderful. So
there is also a project. I think as a closing note, I'd like to give you an illustration of the way the things are changing. We have a project called Celine, which is, we were asked by delightful client to develop an eco resort in Fiji, but specifically for differently abled people. The objective is not only to cater to the needs of different types of people, but really to create spaces in which they can thrive. And that project, Celine, is something that we've really all enjoyed working on a great deal.
Oh, no, that's wonderful, wonderful, inclusive, right from everything. From that's how it should be, shouldn't it? We should be designing for everybody. Like, it's beautiful. So the final question, Louis, if you could paint the world with a magic brush of biophilia, what would it look like?
It's a good question. Well, I think to some extent I've already been doing that in my own little way. I would like to imagine it as a sort of, I'm a big fan of the Lord of the Rings. So I think what I would have liked to see is a kind of Shire style biophilic communities sort of scattered across the world with wise, altruistic leaders of a sort of Gandalf ilk, overseeing, the way the whole thing operates, and that we'd all spend a lot more time, drinking cider and sitting around campfires and dancing. So I think it might look something like that. Some kind of delocalized community of different eco villages, each with its own sort of character and personality based on the space that it's in. Maybe a little bit of an Ewok flavor in the forest, and maybe a little bit of a Hobbit thing in the meadows. Maybe some troglodytes living in some cave dwellings up in the mountains, and that we all join together for festivals every few months and have a great time and enjoy the fireworks and a little bit of a jig around the fire. I think for me it would look something like that.
Thank you for listening to the Journal of Biophilic Design podcast.